I didn't know you went to Minnesota Cold. Which school did you go to up there?
I went to Carleton College in Northfield.
Oh, you and Dwight Rabus, my law school roommate, Carleton College graduates. Very, very good school. John, tell me what you think about the deal that was done last night in Congress and what it portends for the next 2 years if the Georgia Senate seats are, as expected, held by Perdue and Loeffler.
Well, I think you're quite right to link the two, right? Was it Lyndon Johnson who said, or was it that's just an old saying, right? But in order to make people feel see the light, they've got to feel the heat. That's exactly what went on in both parties. I think in particular, Republicans worry that Senate seats that they really need in Georgia and expect that in the natural course of things they would get were being imperiled by the spectacle of drawn-out negotiations at a time when the country's really feeling urgent that something needs to be done to help people get through this winter. Everything depends on those two seats, and everything's in flux. If history prevails, I think they'll go Republican. If we're somehow in a new moment, that would be a very dramatic outcome. We know that Georgia politics are changing. We don't know how rapidly they're changing.
I actually am not too worried about this if people just vote. Georgia is sort of reminds me of Indiana back when it elected Birchby for a little bit, and then Indiana reverted to the norm and is red, and Ohio's gotten redder, and Missouri's gotten redder. And I think Georgia is actually going to be red solidly. There was a Trump effect in the Atlanta suburbs with the suburban women again, but they voted for Perdue almost 50%, and they voted for the Republicans significantly more than they voted for Democrats, plus independents, plus Greens. And then Raphael Warnock comes along, John Harris. And unlike John Ossoff, he's never been in politics before. I don't know that he was even thinking about every sermon he'd ever given on tape and posted at his website. But now they're upset with that. What do you think about sermon clips as legitimate political conversation?
I don't love it. I generally think that, we keep to Caesar's what belongs to Caesar, and that's politics. And it is a fundamentally secular enterprise. And even though people are going to be obviously informed and motivated by their more profound beliefs, including their spiritual beliefs. So anyway, everything's fair game, I guess. You asked me what I think about it, and so I give you an honest answer. I'm uncomfortable with it. I wasn't crazy about the Reverend Wright stuff 12 years ago, and I'm not crazy about charity.
Well, let's explore that a little bit, because I wrote a book probably 15 years ago, either a pastor or a politician. Don't be both. Because you've got to speak truth in the pulpit, whatever you consider truth to be. And Pastor Warnock considers a lot of things to be truth that I don't, but he gets up there and he speaks what he believes to be true, and it's almost, the reason it doesn't work in politics is that you're being as candid can be in the pulpit. I don't know how we can turn our eyes away from that. That's why people have to make a choice, a fundamental choice, whether they're going to pursue a calling or a political career, because they don't go together.
That's well, they may or may not go together. It's also true that from the pulpit, people often speak in metaphor that doesn't easily transfer, and they believe in religious orthodoxy that doesn't necessarily translate into easy everyday conversation. Transubstantiation, right? That's not an exceptional religious concept, would be in the secular context.
Well, let me bring up my favorite Raphael Warnock quote. This is from I want to make sure I get the right year, 2016, cut number 9, Pastor Warnock.
We pray for the people of Cuba in this moment. We remember Fidel Castro, whose legacy is complex. Don't let anybody tell you a simple story. Life usually isn't very simple. His legacy is complex. Kind of like America's legacy is complex.
America's legacy is complex, John Harris, but Fidel Castro is a communist killer. And and Armando Valladares there's not a Cuban American walking around in Georgia who hears that and is not informed by it. The question is, should they be? I think so.
It's not that hard to translate that particular clip. A lot of people on the American left believe that the U.S.-Cuban policy is misplaced, and they don't accept the view of many Cuban Americans that the Castro legacy is sort of a representative of pure evil. As you just articulated, you think it is. It's not hard to find voices on the left that say, well, wait a minute, what about literacy? What about X, Y, Z?
What about medical care, the doctors in Cuba?
Castro's a
John,
bad guy. And
he's a
pretty
killer.
Bad place for Democrats to be defending him.
He's a killer. I mean, there are tens of thousands of people who vanished in Cuba over his regime. Raul runs a police state. It's a surveillance state. It did the Marilito boat lift.
Yeah,
it exiles
don't
people in the
count me as
shark
an
infested.
enthusiast, Hugh.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, he says that, and then he complains that people talk about his saying that. And I just think in America, if you're going to take a position that's radical, and that's a radical position, you can find people on the American left who are all going to wear their Shea T-shirts and be complicit in the atrocities of communists. But it's just got to be in the public domain. I mean, we cannot not talk about it, right?
No one's stopping you from talking about it, Hugh. I would. My point would be that I do think there's abundant lessons from 2020 that Democrats who prevail do so with disciplined politics and a politics that's alert to some of these things that you're talking about, which is that a kind of unfiltered an unfiltered left message is often not the way to get elected in the most competitive districts. The people that do practice disciplined politics and a politics of reassurance.
Yeah, that is
that's
interesting.
Quite out of fashion. That's seen as too centrist or too accommodating or too much of a surrender by many of the most progressive people on the left. But as I look at the results, I do think that is still the right formula for progressive politicians to get elected.
What I hear you saying, John, correct me, I'll give you the last word, is don't be honest. Don't tell people if you're going to defund the police. Don't do that. Be disciplined in not telling people Don't be AOC. Don't be Raphael Warnock. Don't be John Ossoff. Be fuzzy, because your agenda is not going to work.
I think you could be clear, but you have to listen to your voters and speak to them in ways that they're going to be receptive to. And as you point out, there's going to be a lot of potential Democratic voters who would hear that message and say, that's not something I want to hear, or that's not somebody whose values correspond with mine.
No, John, I think America does not want to be as woke as it currently is, at least in elites. Last word. I mean, do you agree with me? They do not like this hyper wokeness.
I think it's a big opening for Republicans because a lot of people are in the middle, and there are still people in the middle are comfortable with identity politics that's represented by what you described as woke politics.
John Harris from Politico, thank you. He woke up early to talk wokeness with me. Thank you, John.